Good evening, everyone. I'm Constance Butel. I'm the chair of the Community Sustainability Commission here in Benicia. I want to welcome you to our fourth and final symposium in the series Sustainable Benicia Energy. We have gathered, with the help of Dominican University of California, an extraordinary group of panelists to address how do we get from where we are to where we want to go in terms of energy sustainability. As you may know, energy is our largest greenhouse gas producer in the city of Benicia. In 2005, it was estimated that our greenhouse gas produced 4.25 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. If we can address energy in a smart, intelligent way, we also can not only reduce our greenhouse gas, but we can save a lot of money, both for our businesses and our residents in Benicia. I would like to, in addition to welcoming you, thank our panelists for making an extraordinary journey today, coming from Sacramento, Mountain View, Alameda County, and where did I forget? Marin County. How could we forget Marin County? And our own mayor, Elizabeth Patterson, who has come at least 2 blocks.
I had a meeting in Nevada.
So without further ado, we're going to launch into this final symposium. And just to remind everyone watching and you here as well, is that there's a study group that has been following each of the symposia and has been working on how does this relate to our climate action plan. And we will be putting together a composite of our findings and making a presentation to the Commission, and the Commission, therefore, to City Council. Mayor Patterson, may I turn it over to you? Thank you.
Thank you, Constance, and Sarah Diefendorf, Lara Barberia, Susan Blackman, and especially the Community Sustainability Commission. They've worked really hard to bring the symposia to us in Benicia, and they have provided science and knowledge to enlighten us for constructive debate in our city's policy making. These symposia contribute to the same conversation at the state and national level. Think about this. Here in Benicia, which once was called the Athens of the West, it seems like we've come home over 150 years ago as universities were founded here in Benicia. It was a seat of education. This is where it was the come-to place for the West for education. And we have a continuum with the Dominican University, and so it's really quite delightful. It actually is the essence of the democratic process, and I hope I can illustrate the connection between democracy and sustainability. And perhaps that's why I've actually been invited to moderate this last symposium. As the Union of Concerned Scientists recently wrote, looking back through our nation's history, we have made the biggest gains in our health, prosperity, and security when our decisions have been guided by the best available science. A popular expression that we hear often these days is take personal responsibility. And it can be applied to issues that seem bigger than one individual may feel that they can fix. You know that coal-fired power plants pollute, spewing particulates and carbon fouling our air. If all Americans today reduce their energy by 20%, we would keep well over 1 billion tons of heat-trapping carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Now, what does that mean? It means approximately 200 average-size coal-fired power plants. Better yet, this 20% energy use savings means money to reinvent in our city, state, and country, and perhaps best of all, it means money that we individually will save for our children's education, our family trips, perhaps a new, cleaner car, a savings account that is good for us and good for the planet. Today's symposium will examine specific strategies for those energy savings. As this is the last of this inspiring, informative, and insightful energy symposia, let us recap. As energy is the largest producer of greenhouse gas emissions and has the biggest potential for cost savings, the symposia has addressed key areas for the community's consideration and study. The first symposium of leading experts in this case was Dr. Linda Swift, Dr. William Housley, and author-consultant Peter Asmuth. address the three baseline areas of fossil fuels, nuclear, and renewable energy. The second symposium addressed tidal, wind, and solar. Sounds like a song. And Delane Easton, our former California Superintendent of Public Instruction, was the moderator. We had John Bonds, Ocean Renewable Power Company, addressed tidal energy. Matthew Wilson, CEO, Foundation Wind Power, addressed wind energy. And David Hernandez, Chevron Energy Solution, addressed solar energy. And that, of course, is the company that has worked with the city in developing our solar project that is behind here at City Hall, at the Community Center, and at other locations. The third symposium expert panel featured Martha Amran, CEO and founder of What's On, presenting a comprehensive view of the U.S. energy environment and providing detailed and specific information for residential, commercial, and industrial sectors found in Benicia. Armando Navarro, Community Energy Manager at PG&E, added further depth and perspectives from the major utility provider in California. Before I describe the process for this evening, I want to appeal to our better nature as a city, as a state, and as a country. As Winston Churchill said, we have not journeyed across centuries, across the oceans, across the mountains, and across the prairies because we are made of sugar candy. The current national conversation in this country is mostly frivolous and socially divisive, when in fact we need to focus on the pillars of our strength. And energy is at the heart of why we have a comfortable life unparalleled in the world, based on economic output for all sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, entertainment, tourism, service, and emerging enterprises. Does it make sense to spend trillions of dollars for a single source of energy that results in wars and so-called collateral damage? Of course not. We have taken the lead in California, and the city of Benicia has responded with action, and yet we continue to have debates about the wisdom of addressing energy cost and planning for the future. This debate has serious consequences. It chills innovation and investment by government because of the reluctance to incur political consequences by officials throughout the many layers of government in California. It also discourages investment in research and development for fear that there's a lack of stability in funding, unlike the current world of fossil fuels. Energy is our challenge as the Civil War, the Great Depression, World War II, and the Cold War were. In those, we worked together. We invested. We had collective sacrifice, and we made the difference as a people. I know that you are here tonight because you think energy matters. I ask that you go forth and engage. Engage by your actions, engage with letters to newspapers and through your social network, engage at work, at play, and stay informed and current. You are our soldiers, our ambassadors, our pioneers, and our leaders. And with you, our state and country will be, once again, that strong, creative, resourceful, and hardworking people that has gotten us through our challenges of the past. I ask that you do this for the sake of our children who need us to act and think sustainably, which after all means we care about them. We care about their children and all future children. To do otherwise is to leave them wreckage. The process for this evening is I will introduce each speaker who will have 15 minutes, and after each speaker we'll take a few questions. And I would like, after you all have spoken, is to maybe have a conversation among yourselves. And then we'll have some more questions. And cards will be provided by various people who are designated, and they will show their hands now. Can you say? So if you have a card, be sure that they see your card for these questions. So our first, and I believe I'm going in order with the order that's listed on my sheet of paper. That is really small print, but I'll do the best I can. Because of my checkered history of working in many different areas and everything, I actually know practically everybody here. And it's really quite fun. And so I won't tell them stories about you. The first speaker is Patrick Stoner, someone I've known for a really very long time and a great inspiration to me and to many other people, and he's a dear friend. He has been a member of the Local Government Commission staff since 1993. The Local Government Commission is a nonprofit organization that provides inspiration, technical assistance, and networking opportunities to local elected officials and community leaders working to create healthy, walkable, and resource-efficient communities. In 2010, he was chosen to serve as California's statewide local government energy efficiency best practices coordinator. You're working on a shorter title? A position created by the California Public Utilities Commission. Prior to that, he served as the Energy and Resource Conservation Program Director for Local Government Commission. Patrick?
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Constance and Susan, for inviting me to speak and talk about some of the stuff I've learned about local government energy programs over the last 19 years as the energy guy at the Local Government Commission. Now, as Elizabeth said, I'm the statewide local government energy efficiency best practices coordinator. So, next slide. It's a position that was created by the Public Utilities Commission in 2009. I have funding through, at least through the end of this year and maybe a little bit longer, to help cities and counties in California develop and implement energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction programs and policies. Part of what I'm doing under this work is to develop some best practices case studies of what local governments are doing, and so a lot of what I'm going to talk about today come from those case studies, and there's going to be a place at the end of the last slide. We'll show you where you can find those if you want them. I'm also very closely related to the California Long-Term Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan, so next one. It was adopted in 2008 by the California Public Utilities Commission, and there are two big goals in that plan, and they are that by 2020, all new residential construction will be zero net energy, and by 2030, the same is true for commercial construction. And so that basically means zero net energy, that the building will generate as much energy as is consumed in the course of a year. There is a local government chapter in this book, and I'm really kind of focused on that. So the next slide. I'm supposed to be tracking how well local governments are doing statewide, not individual local governments, but as a whole, local governments are doing towards the 5 goals that they have been placed in the strategic plan for local governments. So the first one is that there will be 100% compliance. These are all goals for 2020. So 100% compliance with Title 24 by 2020. And Title 24 is California's energy efficiency statewide standard for new construction. California was the first state to do a statewide energy standard, and it's also, it gets updated every 3 years, and it's also the most stringent. So right now, there's something less than 100% compliance. Local governments are the places where it's implemented through their planning, permitting, and inspection processes for new construction. So they want to have 100% compliance by 2020. The next goal is that a majority of local governments will adopt policies or programs to either mandate or encourage new construction to go beyond the state minimum standard. The next one is that energy use in municipal buildings in California will be 20% less than it was in 1990, so that's a big goal. The fourth goal is that every city and county in the state will adopt an energy, climate, or sustainability plan by 2020. And the last one is that every city and county will have internal capacity to implement all cost-effective energy efficiency in both their own operations and in their community. I mentioned Title 24. It was enacted, the first one was adopted in the 1970s, and that, along with the money that the utilities were directed to spend on energy efficiency, has made the per capita electricity consumption in California remain flat for the last 40 years. If you look at this graph, you can see that everywhere else in the country, the per capita energy use has gone up by 50%. So it's a really important thing that we're doing here in California. The total energy use, of course, has gone up in California because there are a lot more people, but the per capita has remained the same. There are a number of state policies besides that. These are some that have been adopted in the last 15 years that affect local governments and energy use. And I was planning to talk about the two in red, community choice and PACE programs, but Shawn's going to talk about community choice, so I get to drop that one from my list. I was kind of running over my time limit anyway. So, okay, next one. There are a number of policies. The first one, the RICO and SECO, those are they aren't very popular. There aren't very many local governments who have done them or are looking at them. There are a few, but I wanted to mention them because it was one of the first things that happened local governments took action before the state did to try to address the energy efficiency or lack of energy efficiency in all the buildings that were built before Title 24. So this was their time of sale ordinances, or if there's major remodel on a building, they require that the building be upgraded to a certain extent. So back before 1979, I think was the first Title 24, there was no standard at all. So this was an effort to try to improve the energy efficiency of older buildings. Now we have Energy Upgrade California, which Elizabeth was telling me she took part of recently. There's a big push now to try to get those older buildings upgraded. REACH codes are addressing that second goal, which are just local ordinances that will be stricter in terms of energy use in a new building than what the state requires. I did a fact sheet on that, which you can see there. You get more information there. But there are over 40 cities and counties who have gotten approved REACH codes from the Energy Commission right now. And it's a little bit easier now to do it than it used to be, because the Public Utilities Commission has cycles of funding for doing energy efficiency. And this current cycle, the investor-owned utilities, which include PG&E, have done cost-effectiveness studies for each of the 16 climate zones in California. And in order to get an approved REACH code, you have to have a cost-effectiveness study. So cities and counties no longer have to pay for that. It's all out there for free if you want to do something like that. The zero-net energy communities are kind of an extension of those zero-net energy buildings that we talked about earlier. And these are happening now. In Davis, at the University of California, in Davis, they're expanding their built-out campus, and they have a new section which is going to be a zero-net energy section, and it's going to house 5,000 faculty, staff, and students. It's going to have an elementary school, a couple of small like grocery stores, and I think a coffee shop and a little restaurant. And that's going to be totally zero-net energy. They put PVs on the rooftops, and they're putting in a small fuel cell. So that's an example of what you can do if you're interested in really trying to push the envelope now these days. In the 1980s, there was a big push. Local Government Commission was started in 1979 by Jerry Brown's first administration. And we were at that time trying to help local governments do things to reduce energy use. And solar-ready rooftops were real popular back then. Cities and counties didn't want to require that a new building have to put on a solar water heating system or a solar PV system, but they wanted to make sure that opportunity wasn't lost in the future. So they were requiring that the rooftops be built in a way that they could maximize the use of that solar energy if somebody in the future wanted to do that. They also had to be built strong enough to accept that, those systems. And in some cases, they required that the attic be pre-plumbed for either water or electricity or both, just so that would be an option for the future owner if the current owner didn't want to do that. A lot of local governments did municipal pools as solar water heated as well. One thing that's kind of exciting right now is the aggregated purchasing and financing that's going on. And somebody else is going to talk about one of the ones I was going to talk about, so I can make that a little bit shorter too. But a couple of cities have done things. There's Solar Santa Monica, which is a program of Santa Monica. They didn't want to operate that program themselves, but they went out there and got a bunch of installers, got them kind of trained and certified. They went to their banks in Santa Monica, the local banks, and got them to kind of develop these off-the-shelf financing packages, and then they pull them together. And the city of Santa Monica has on their website, and they have a sustainability office. People can come in there and get referrals to installers and financing, and their goal there is to have all of the rooftops full of PV. The city of San Jose did a program as well for city employees working with their local credit union. It got oversold right away. It was very successful, and now they're looking at trying to do that kind of an aggregated system for the residents and businesses in San Jose. I was actually talking about financing, and one of the things that that's really a good program right now, and I know that you're not involved yet, but in 2004, the Public Utilities Commission directed the investor-owned utilities to enter into partnerships with local governments across the state. And right now, there are about 50 local government partnerships statewide, but they represent about 300 cities already and counties, because a lot of them are regional partnerships, like the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments has a partnership with PG&E that has 21 cities in it and 3 counties. Anyway, so there are many in the Bay Area. There's one in the East Bay that includes cities from Alameda County, Contra Costa County, San Francisco has a partnership, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, Marin, Sonoma, Napa, Lake, Mendocino, Humboldt, Yolo, they all have partnerships with PG&E, but Solano County doesn't have one yet. So it might be something you want to look at. And right now, the Public Utilities Commission and the utilities and local governments are looking at the next round of funding for the next 2 years. And so there might be an opportunity for you to jump in there right now and either try to start a partnership in Solano County, or maybe you could even join the East Bay partnership that's existing right now. They provide funding and assistance for doing municipal energy upgrades on your buildings, and they also provide some funding for doing some of that strategic planning work I talked about earlier that my job is associated with. They all are also now offering 0% interest loans for cities and counties. It's on-bill financing, and so they will help you identify the projects on your municipal facilities. They'll give you the money to do the projects along with the rebates that they offer as well, and then you repay that on your monthly energy bill. And they only will give this type of money for projects where the repayment amount will be less than or equal to the amount of savings you're going to get. So it's really a no-brainer. If you have something to do in your city facilities, you should be talking to PG&E about doing that. Next, yeah. I want to talk about revolving loan funds, and I did a couple of fact sheets on these as well. But the California Energy Commission has had one for over 10 years. They give grants, so you get free money to do audits of your facilities. This is for cities and counties and school districts. And then, if you decide to go forward, they have low-interest loans to help you pay for that. So they give you 3% right now on a loan to do the upgrades that they identify in these audits. And the amount of money that they have to loan out varies depending on how quickly things get paid back, but it's a big fund that keeps being turned over, and it's been going on for about 10 years. The two fact sheets I did were on Alameda County and San Jose, and again, I'll let you read how they did them in these fact sheets, but the Alameda County was kind of interesting because it's operated by their General Services Agency, and the county supervisors agreed to, and they pay all the utility bills for this county, they agreed to let the General Services Agency charge a 10% surcharge on all the utility bills for the departments. And with that 10%, they have now a staff that operates this program of 5 or 6 people, engineers and people doing finance and all this kind of stuff. But they will go identify the projects, they'll do the procurement, they'll find the contractors, they'll oversee the installations, they do the financing, and they make sure that the energy savings are actually there, and it's at no cost to any of the departments. And so they do all this work, and the department then benefits in their general fund budget after that. In San Jose, they do it differently. In order to keep the fund going there, the city council agreed to let the office that's doing this program, the revolving energy funds, which are doing upgrades to their city facilities, they get to keep the first 2 years of energy savings to keep that fund going. After that, their savings revert to the general fund, but they want to get that pool of money bigger and bigger and bigger so they can keep doing more projects. And both of these projects started with rebates that they got from PG&E. Alameda accumulated like $3 million over 10 years for a project they had with the PG&E, and that's how they started their pool of funds. With San Jose, it was they had a couple $100,000 from a street lighting retrofit project that they did. That's how they got started. But you don't have to be big to do this thing either. The city of El Cerrito in the East Bay started one of these revolving loan funds. They have fewer facilities and smaller facilities with a $15,000 rebate from PG&E and with help from a nonprofit in Marin County. So I can connect you with them if you're interested in finding more about that. I think, are people talking about PACE? I can't remember if they are or not. So it's another way to finance projects for people in your community. It started in Berkeley. It was their idea. And it was a kind of a pilot project there. It was so successful. Berkeley is a charter city, so they could do things that not everybody else could do. But it was very, very successful. The state then passed AB 811, which allowed any city or county to set up a PACE program. And what it basically is that people voluntarily agree to be assessed on their property taxes to do some permanent energy efficiency or renewable projects for the buildings. You can't get this to do to buy a new refrigerator because that could go with when you leave. But if you're doing photovoltaics or some sort of more permanent infrastructure stuff on your house or business, you can get the money from the city or the county to actually do the project, and then you agree to pay it back on your property tax over whatever period of time you need, it's up to 20 years. What's good about this is that people don't do energy efficiency or renewable projects because it's such a high upfront cost. That's kind of eliminated with this program. And if you happen to sell the building before the repayment period happens, the repayment goes on with the next owner. So it's a really good program. Back in 2010, the Federal Housing Finance Agency kind of stopped all residential programs for the most part because they are the ones that oversee the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loan programs, and they would not allow any PACE property to have a Fannie or Freddie loan. And so they're fighting that right now. I mean, there's working through legislation and other ways to try to overturn that. But Sonoma County said, forget it, I'm going to do it anyway. So they went ahead and did it, and I think Palm Desert still does it. They're about the only two, I think, left in the country that are doing residential programs, but there are a lot of commercial programs out there because they don't have Freddie or Fannie loans associated with them. I want to talk a little bit about the Sonoma County one because they were one of the first ones. I know they've been around about 2 years. They've had $56 million in assessments. I checked their website last week for over 3,200 projects in Sonoma County. They estimate that they've either created or retained 680 jobs, and 80% of the installations are done by local contractors, Sonoma County contractors. So it's good for the people there, and it's good for the economy in Sonoma County as well. Okay. I'm going to skip community choice because Shawn's going to talk about that. Next one. I was asked to talk about Europe, and if you look at the website I have there, that's a place to find more information. They're really aggressive in Europe on various things. I don't think it's really going to be that useful for people in Benicia because people in Europe are taxed at a much higher rate than we are here, and so they're able to afford these more extensive projects. But if you want to go to that site, it's a really good organization. It's Energy Aggregation Network, and they're representing over, I think, 3,000 cities and counties in Europe. But there's information there. Quickly, resources. If you're looking at general plan stuff or anything to do with policies and implementation, this is a guidebook that the Energy Commission put out. LGC helped them write the first guidebook in 1993, and we helped with the update in 2008. Lots of really good programs there, including environmental benefits and greenhouse gas reductions and so forth. Next one. There's a Statewide Energy Efficiency Collaborative, which is a partnership between ICLEI, Institute for Local Government Commission, and the 4 investor-owned utilities. All the work that they do is free. There are lots of ICLEI, especially now, you used to have to join ICLEI to get their stuff. Now, everything they produce under this program is free to cities and counties in California, and they have guidebooks, they have workshops, they have tools that you can use, and so forth. So lots of good stuff. That's the website to go find more information. And just quickly, the League of California Cities and CSAC represent local governments before the legislature to make sure they're trying to protect your interests in Sacramento. But nobody was doing that once the laws get implemented at the state agency level. So the Local Government Sustainable Energy Coalition grew out of the community choice aggregation proceeding at the PUC, and now they're there representing the local government interests before the Public Utilities Commission, Energy Commission, and the Air Resources Board on climate change stuff and energy stuff. And that's their website if you want more information. And I think that's it. And that website at the bottom is where you can find those fact sheets I was talking about earlier. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's excellent. Do we have any, certainly, why don't we go ahead. It was painful to stop. Do we have any questions? I'm going to, while we're gathering the cards, if any, I have a question. On the local government partnership, I'm aware of the East Bay One and all the efforts that have gone on in Sonoma and Marin. What are the key steps to get involved with one, and where do the initiatives come from? In other words, is it from electeds? Is it from citizens, an organization?
Well, this is for local government, so it's probably not going to come from the residents or businesses. And if you want, I definitely can connect you with the people at PG&E that do operate the programs. In fact, you know Leif Christensen? He used to be an LGC employee.
Oh, yes.
He's now the person in charge of local government partnerships at PG&E. And also, if you want me, I can connect you with the people at the East Bay if you think you might want to join that partnership. I don't know how good your relationships are with other cities and the county, but you could potentially even join together and have your own Solano County partnerships with PG&E.
Right. I actually spoke to Councilmember Tom Butt when we were at the Local Government Commission meeting up in Yosemite, and he mentioned that. So that would be really good. Do we have any? We do have cards. Let me see. It says, Energy Upgrade California is a great program, but it's moving very slowly. How important is outreach and marketing, and what do you recommend on a local level to promote implementing such programs?
Well, actually, the Local Government Commission had the contract with the California Energy Commission to try and do the promotion and working with cities and counties across the state to do that. That money, unfortunately, it took a long time to get the contract, to get everything signed, and it had to end on March 30th of this year. And so things were just starting to get rolling. What's really good is that the Public Utilities Commission agreed to take that over and can continue funding it. And so it's going to keep going on. It just took some time for it to get rolling. And I think because we've got the commitment from the Public Utilities Commission, it's going to happen much faster now. As far as, I don't know if Solano County was one of the ones that was a partner, but again, people in our office, Kate Meese, if you want me to connect you with her, she's the person that's overseeing that effort statewide, so we can help you.
Well, we have a presentation on the energy upgrade previously. In fact, we actually filled the chambers with introductory through Chuck Rieger and his nonprofit organization, whose name I cannot remember. It's Solano Initiatives. It's what? Thanks, Solano Center for Business Innovation. And so there were contractors and citizens and residents interested. And I believe that's how Constance Butel and I know, I don't see Roger Straw, and then me got involved with doing the upgrade. And by the way, I am apparently going to have a savings of about 30%, which I thought was pretty cool.
Great. Well, I also want to make kind of a little plug for, we mentioned this Statewide Energy Efficiency Collaborative, and one of the things that LGC does under that collaborative is do a statewide energy forum every year. Last year it was in San Jose, but this year it's going to be in Los Angeles, but it's also a good place for you to learn about these types of programs, and you could come down to that if you wanted to come, or send somebody from the city. We're going to talk about Energy Aggregation California and all these other kind of strategic planning initiatives and so forth, and I'm the host for that.
Oh, excellent.
No, because it's utilities. Yeah.
And the next question.
It's all energy efficiency. Sorry.
The next question is: has any one program stood out above the rest in being successful?
I'm not sure. I mean.
In other words, well, I think there might be a little confusion. Some of these programs are really designed for specific markets. Not all programs fit all needs. So maybe you could talk about the strengths of one program, let's say for municipalities, government, and another program that's really strong for residential and commercial.
Well, for local governments, I mean, a lot of what you need to be doing, I think, is doing your own infrastructure and then also promoting what can be done for residents and businesses. And a lot of that is coming through your utility. Up here it's PG&E. But also, if you're looking about residential and commercial stuff, I think it's the PACE program. That's the thing that's, if you look at that slide I did earlier about the per capita energy use in California, a lot of that Title 24 is just related to brand new buildings, and so that keeps ratcheting down what new buildings are using. But you have to attack those old buildings if you want to make a big difference. And so Energy Aggregation California does that. But also if you can set up a PACE program, that's going to be the best thing for everybody in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce energy use as well. Or community choice aggregation, but Shawn's going to talk about that one.
All right, why don't we...
Well, actually, we had a program, you know that too. We got funding from the Energy Commission, LGC, to help a dozen cities and counties investigate the community choice aggregation if it was feasible to do that. And Marin County was one of the ones, and now that they have a program going. So.
All right. Speaking of, Shawn Marshall is our next speaker, or at least according to the list that I have. Do you want me to go in order? Linear. All right. I can do that. So Caroline Judy is the Assistant Director for the County of Alameda General Services Agency. She has administrative and strategic leadership responsibilities for all of GSA's 436 employees and department budgets totaling $135 million. Her areas of focus include developing performance metrics, improving disaster preparedness, and managing the procurement outreach program to small, emerging, and local businesses. She is also actively engaged in large design-build construction projects and sustainability, energy efficiency, and renewable energy initiatives. She has a master's degree in political science from Stanford University and baccalaureate in economics from Reed College. Carolyn lives with her family in Oakland, California. All right.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. First of all, Mayor Elizabeth, I really want to applaud your leadership in hosting these forums. It's a great way of getting the community engaged and involved. And then Patrick described many of the state policies that create the climate energy efficiency or renewable energy objectives for local government. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit more in detail about several different models that allow us at the local government level to meet and exceed the state objectives, and particularly in relation to our own municipal facilities. Next slide. Really, more than ever right now, we need to talk about having big impacts, and as local governments, we can affect change both within our own municipal facilities, but then also within the community. We may not all agree on the contributing factors to climate change, but we know that change is happening. Many local governments, such as Benicia, are really taking the lead in changing the way that we do business and putting together very aggressive climate action plans that outline goals and objectives for both the municipal facilities, but also for the community in order to reach the AB 32 or greenhouse gas emission reduction goals that have been set by the state. So how do we go about implementing those plans? That's really the biggest challenge that we have, and we get through the process of putting the plan together, but then the real work starts. We really have to try to figure out how we get those projects into the ground and work with the community to bring about change. And one of the things that we face are a set of barriers. There are really four, what I see, fundamental barriers. First of all, it's where do we start? Second is who has the resources, who has the skills and the leadership ability to really move us forward? How do we pay for the work that we're talking about? And then what happens after we've identified the needs, and how do we get that work actually done? One of the challenges that most governments in California are facing is that after many, many years of budget cuts, we face what I call budget resource bunker methodology. We're exhausted. Many times that because we've had so many cuts within our organizations, we feel like we can't do things that are innovative and that we can't be creative. It impedes our ability to really innovate and change the way that we provide government services. So part of what we have to do is address that issue. Oftentimes what we need to do is to really focus on how we pay for projects and how we can use partnerships to bring resources together across jurisdictional boundaries and work collaboratively. So I'm going to talk a lot about collaboration, but first go ahead. One of the things that's also important as we look to how we operationalize our strategic plans is to have a sense of fun. And I like to use, we need to have big impacts. We need to be inventive greenies. Just as in the past, we explored and really experimented and innovated, we have to be innovators again today. So what we're talking about here is really change, organizational change to address some of the complex issues that are facing us in society. Many of us can't afford to pay for projects out of our general fund. So we rely on other means of financing. We're either chasing after grant funds that are available, the sorts of programs that Patrick was talking about at the CEC or CPUC, or we have opportunities for local governments to issue debt financing. But traditionally, we want to reserve our debt financing capability for larger capital projects, new city halls, police centers, community centers, et cetera. And so it's kind of sometimes a difficult sell to work with the public and say, well, we want to use debt financing to do renewable energy or energy efficiency projects. Ideally, we have elected boards, and we've been very lucky in Alameda County that we've been able to get board approval to use the savings, the utility savings that have been generated by projects to as an investment pool and use that money, as Patrick was talking about, to plow that money back into new projects. But that's really fairly an unusual situation. So we try to fund projects using grants. Some of those grants, the ERA grants that you may have heard about, really required partnerships as a means of bringing people together and executing those projects. But one of the things that I've seen is that many of our financing methods restrict us to working on maybe just individual projects, and that we don't address an entire property portfolio. And as an example, Alameda County has 7 million square feet of facilities total. And we haven't really had strategies, even though we've done tremendous amount of things, and Alameda County really is a leader in sustainability and renewable energy. We haven't been able to address solutions that really impact our entire portfolio all at once. So, we can go to the next slide. There are really 4 different financing methods that we have. Direct acquisition is where we have the cash and we can go out and buy, pay for, whether it's solar or energy efficiency. We have debt financing available to us, so that's through your typical either general obligation bonds or certificates of participation, or through a specialized debt financing means. There are clean renewable energy bonds, some of the low interest opportunities that, again, Patrick was talking about. Then we have really a third-party model called a power purchase agreement, where we pay for the power that's generated and the systems are installed and owned by a third party. Or similarly, we have a third-party lease. That's another way that we can bring energy efficiency and renewable energy into our municipal facilities. So those 4 primary means of financing for government facilities. All right, go ahead, next change. I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that we have to kind of really achieve some big impacts in our projects. One is demonstration projects, and then really finding private sector partners, and then working on opportunities for collaborative procurement. Each of these different methodologies really has a different type of impact, and you have to use them selectively. Demonstration projects test technology, and they enable us to demonstrate commercial viability of new products. Partnerships leverage financing and know-how, and then accelerate the adoption of technologies. And then finally, collaborative procurement really enables us to leverage economies of scale and increase the affordability of new technology and the diffusion, if you will, of that technology. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. In part of my career, I worked in Santa Clara County. In 2008, in Santa Clara County, we worked with a very small startup company. At the time, it was called Ion America. We installed a planar solid oxide fuel cell system at our county's 911 call center, so the center that's responsible for the public safety radio system. That company is now called Bloom Energy. The project that we had tested the commercial viability of Bloom Energy's technology, and thereafter they made some refinements and improvements. They're now a very successful company, and there's quite a lot of buzz about them. In 2009, Santa Clara County installed what I think is one of the sexiest things I get to talk about, wireless pneumatic thermostats in several of our large county buildings. We engaged in this program so that we could participate in PG&E's auto demand response program. Those thermostats are made by a company called Cypress Enviro Systems. They cost around $175,000 for us to install in 300,000 square feet of facilities in 2 different buildings. It took about 8 days to install, and those of you that have experience in the HVAC, heating and air conditioning world, know that is a very fast installation of a change in technology. Those systems generated savings and had a payback period of less than 16 months. That's very, very rapid, and we saved over $1.7 million from that investment. So pretty significant savings. So looking at in the past 5 years, more recently in Alameda County has engaged in a partnership with Chevron Energy Systems and installed fuel cell, solar, wind turbines, and a battery storage system at the county's 1 million square foot jail, and taken that jail completely off the grid. So it can run grid parallel, or it can go completely off the grid into a standalone mode. And I'm sorry, I gave the number of 1.7 million savings. That's actually the jail's savings, the annual savings. So that's a very significant partnership. Again, the 3 examples I just gave you are demonstration projects with public-private partnerships, but give you a little bit sense of the opportunities that we have, again, on a single facility or a single campus focus. All right. Finally, I want to talk about collaborative public sector collaborations. Go ahead, next slide. And I'm going to describe really 3 different projects. The first one was a project, the Silicon Valley Regional Renewable Project. The second relates to electric vehicle fleet, and the third one is a project that we're currently engaged in called the Regional Renewable Energy Project. Go ahead, next slide. So in terms of lasting impacts and having really a significant impact, the Silicon Valley project, and we're going to talk about a little bit more in addition, was a collaborative procurement of 9 participating agencies with 70 sites in 2 counties, in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. The project was led by Santa Clara County with a nonprofit organization called Joint Venture Silicon Valley functioning as a convener that really brought people together and helped facilitate the project. And then there was a technical advisor, a firm called Optiny, that helped really guide us through. The Silicon Valley Regional Renewable Project was a power purchase agreement, so it was one of those third-party financing models that I talked about. But it enabled the participating agencies to achieve really significantly reduced pricing compared to PG&E over a 20-year term, and enabled those local governments that participated to reach their greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, or at least facilitated in that. And then more importantly, in some respect, it helped generate around $70 million of economic impact in those 2 counties. And the initiative was projected to generate around 300 jobs. So that's the type of big impact that can happen as a result of collaboration. Next slide. The local government electric vehicle fleet project is a currently active regional collaborative procurement with that will procure 90 charging stations and vehicles for 11 participating agencies in the 9-county Bay Area region. The project's being led by Alameda County, with a group called the Bay Area Climate Collaborative is functioning as the convener on that project. It was launched in 2010 and received grant funding through the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, so this is now fund source coming from a grant. Unfortunately, the money that was selected there was what they call congestion management relief funds, and those dollars come with some federal requirements on them, specifically a Buy America requirement. Well, it's pretty hard right now to find a pure electric vehicle that's built in America. So we've run into a little bit of, built in the U.S., we've run into some challenges there with that project and actually implementing that project because of one of the requirements on the source of funds. But regardless, the EV fleet project should achieve over 540,000 pounds of net CO2 avoidance and a reduction of over 3,500 pounds of criteria pollutants annually. So it will have a very significant impact. And one of the benefits is that it will establish charging stations that will be available to the public and in the participating jurisdictions. Almost there. So go ahead, next slide. So the third project that I want to talk about is the Regional Renewable Energy Project, and I refer to it as the big sister of the Silicon Valley Project. We have now 29 participating agencies that are collaborating in 5 counties: Alameda, Contra Costa, San Mateo, Santa Clara, and some parts of Solano County. The procurement is open to cities, counties, special districts, schools, and the state-owned properties in those 5 counties. At the most recent count, we have over 200 sites that have been brought together, and we hope to issue a request for proposals in the fall this year. Can you show the next slide? So that just gives you a little visual representation of the diversity, geographic diversity of the various sites that we have in that project, and will have a pretty significant impact. Next slide.
What kind of power are you putting?
It's open for jurisdictions to decide what they want, whether it's solar, fuel cell, wind, but most of the participating agencies are interested in solar. Okay. Just collaboration is really great. There are a lot of benefits, but it also takes a long time. It takes longer than our traditional procurement processes because we have to go through, we have to educate all of our partners and do a lot of outreach, and those things take a little more time than standard processes. But the benefits of collaboration are that when governments come together, we have a lot of power in negotiating, and we tend to get much better deals for our taxpayers than when we're isolated by ourselves doing individual projects. And that's particularly the case for some of the smaller jurisdictions who are participating in these large collaboratives. Collaboration is nothing new for government. Local governments have been collaborating and collaboratively procuring commodities for many, many years off of some very large multi-state procurement pools, such as WISCA. So I really believe that we can complement our organizational resources, and particularly in an era of reduced budgets, by engaging in partnerships, whether those are public-private partnerships, doing demonstration projects, or large-scale projects like the collaborations that I've been talking about this evening. That's it. We have our next slide, the last one. If you have any questions, you can contact any one of us on our team about the various projects, and of course, we're happy to take questions when we're done.
Thank you, Caroline. One thing is you mentioned Solano, my ears perked up, and so is it a governmental agency? Because I'm not aware of any in Solano County.
Off there. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's somebody from West County that's participating, and I'm not bringing up the name of who it was.
Well, sometimes we are confused with Contra Costa County, and it's painfully recognized here. But to my knowledge, there is nothing in Solano County. Solano County is the most rural county.
Right.
So are there some thoughts that you have discussed among your colleagues and others in how to get a rural county like Solano County engaged?
I think one of the challenges, particularly for rural counties or smaller communities, is that the sites for municipal agencies tend to be fairly small. One of the opportunities when we get to the point where we have net metering and we're able to do particularly solar installations that are larger than a load that exists on a particular building, there will be some great opportunities for rural counties to participate there, where you'll be able to generate more power than you need and sell it back to the grid. We're not quite there yet, but there should be, and I'm hoping here shortly, some opportunities to do that.
Just one comment and then actually a question. I read extensively about what's going on in the energy world, and I noticed that Alameda County had set up this conservation fund where basically the money saved went back into a fund. And when we were setting up our program, I slipped a little email to the city manager, and it was done with no controversy. And so we actually have a conservation fund in Benicia.
That's great.
And it's really great. To what extent are you looking at cap and trade to facilitate some of these programs?
Yes, cap and trade is, I believe, presents a really great opportunity, because you'll have a potentially, dedicated funding source that can be used to do some of the large-scale projects that we've been talking about. one of the barriers that we face, even with the large collaborative, is that many jurisdictions don't have the couple $1,000s that it costs for each site to do just a site survey, an analysis of the load that exists at a site and what opportunities, what would be the cost benefit of various types of renewable energy for that particular site. So there's a barrier to, before you can even get started, because you have to pull together information about the site in order to make a marketable package. So cap and trade, if the CEC sets up, or PUC sets up...
California Energy Commission and the
Public Utilities Commission, sorry.
If
okay. They set up a fund, there may be a fund that we could use to help pay for those initial site assessments and get jurisdictions over that initial barrier so that they're able to adopt some of these technologies in their buildings.
Well, if you all could write this question down, and we'll ask it of all of you at the end, and that is, to what extent and what role do you see right now in making sure that legislation that's being considered actually influences the California Energy Commission, the governor's budget, and the public utilities? I do have two questions. So far, does Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, still provide an avenue to local government for green procurement with collaborative RFPs, et cetera?
Yeah, so the Silicon Valley project actually came out of ABAG. They have an energy program, and it was at the ABAG commission. There's a subcommittee of this energy group. They were the ones who had started talking about doing a collaborative procurement for around renewable energy. Many of us buy natural gas off of a collaborative procurement that ABAG sets up for local governments, and it's much less expensive than what we would be paying otherwise. We lock into long-term natural gas contracts. So yes, ABAG is still active.
All right, and then there are two follow-up questions with that. Any relationship to regional renewable energy project?
Yes, this is what the project that we're talking about.
Okay, and then how can Benicia take advantage of this? What are the process steps?
You send me an email. We're just concluding, we're following a 12-step program, which was a best practices model that we developed with the Silicon Valley project. And we're just sort of in the second step of concluding our outreach to various governments. We've been coming around the Bay Area and with a presentation talking about the benefits of collaboration, et cetera. So we're still working with jurisdictions that are interested in participating. We just had DMV, I don't know whether it was after the governor's executive order, DMV got very excited about joining our collaborative, and DMV with locations in the 4 counties brought in a whole bunch of sites. So we're still adding people.
Well, why don't I ask one more, and then we'll go to our next speaker, and then we'll come back and finish up some questions. But the one more is actually because I just got a text message from somebody who's watching, or paying attention in the audience, I should say. On net metering, there are different generations of net metering. So when you refer to future net metering, you're not talking about the current state of affairs with net metering.
Right.
And can you describe the differences between those two?
I can't give you the exact price of what you're paying right now. If when you sell back to the grid, I recall it's something like 11 cents a kilowatt hour. It's low, and it's not sufficient really to make the economics of oversizing your site, oversizing the power that you install on that site. Hopefully, and similar to the model in Europe and similar to the model in Canada, we'll move to a more sort of equitable pricing where that you will get a much better price for the power that you submit back into the grid. So you're absolutely right, 2 different models. Some of the legislation that's been talked about would boost that price up.
And many people see the opportunity with large rooftops like in industrial parks or business parks as being a collective where there could be lots and lots of energy, probably adequate to service our entire community. Yet, what prevents us from doing that?
It's, you know, in economic jargon, it's called principal agent. It's that landlords who own those properties are not, they don't have a financial incentive to make the improvement on the rooftop to install, either do energy efficiency projects or to install renewable energy, because they're not the one who's paying the utility bill. Oftentimes the utility bill is being paid by the tenant that's in that commercial property. And so to work on that relationship, you really have to make it financially worthwhile for that landlord to make that investment. And that's been the biggest challenge with the types of projects that, you know, similar to what I've talked about, doing a collaborative procurement on the private sector, bringing private sector firms. San Francisco tried this, had some limited success, but it is, you run into the principal agent problem.
Yeah. I just want to say, too, that there is something going on right now, and I'm sorry I haven't been following it very carefully because I've been really focused on my new job, but there is, at least for multifamily net metering, rulemaking going on at the PUC right now, so they're trying to address some of that for at least residential, multifamily residential.
Yeah, on the residential side, and it's somewhat true, particularly for office space for commercial landlords, you have a more marketable property. If you make that investment, you have a property that you can market as, you know, it's green and sustainable, and there are folks who are willing to pay a little bit more to be in a higher quality office space, or, you know, in a nicer retail facility. And certainly I think on the residential side, there are folks as well that are interested in that. You know, not everyone's able to do that, but.
Right. All right, well, we'll get back to you.
Great.
So our next speaker is Steve Attinger. He's the Environmental Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Mountain View. He has almost 20 years of experience in sustainability program development, strategy, product marketing, and technical training. His experience spans the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, including working with startup and multinational companies and a finance position in Switzerland. Mr. Attinger is the Environmental Sustainability Coordinator, as I said, for Mountain View, and he's providing a long-term sustainability vision and strategy for the city. He has led several tactical initiatives, including a solar power purchase agreement, a residential energy efficiency program, city and community greenhouse gas inventories and reduction targets, green building and purchasing policies, a 60-person community environmental sustainability task force, an employee green team, and a bottled water policy. I'll let you use the experience of your past for your presentation, I'm sure. So, Steve, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Patterson, and welcome members of the public. It's my distinct pleasure to join you here tonight and share some of the experiences that I've had in my 4 years in Mountain View, and prior to that in my professional career in sustainability. So tonight, basically, I'm going to cover a couple major areas, but it's going to focus around residential and commercial energy efficiency and renewable energy opportunities available for municipalities, the commercial sector, and the residential sector. So to quickly cover our agenda, I'm going to start out a little bit talking about kind of a grassroots effort that we undertook in Mountain View starting in 2008. That's going to provide a little bit of context for the audience and for the city, so we can kind of tell you a little bit about the process that Mountain View used when it was creating its sustainability program formally 4 years ago. I'm also going to talk about residential and commercial efficiency programs available, go into some more detail on the program that Caroline talked about, which is called the Silicon Valley Renewable Energy Project, talk a little bit more about energy financing programs and legislation, although Pat's already covered some of that, and also talk about our general plan update and the associated greenhouse gas reduction program. Next slide. So, winding back the clocks a little bit, 2008, early 2008, shortly after I actually joined the city, one of the first things I was tasked with doing was coordinating a large outreach effort to the community to solicit input from the residents and business people to help guide the council in their decision on what actions Mountain View should take to become more sustainable overall. So this was a perfect example of what you called grassroots public involvement toward creating public policy. As I said, I was the staff liaison to that task force. It was comprised of over 60 members of the public. It worked for 8 months and ultimately delivered a 300-page report to the City Council and providing 89 recommendations on what the city should be doing to be more sustainable in 11 different topic areas. And when I say topic areas, I mean such things as energy, water, waste, green building, those kinds of topics. So, faced with a 300-page report, the mayor very wisely appointed a 3-council-member sustainability subcommittee and basically said to the subcommittee, okay, you figure out of these 89 recommendations, which ones we should prioritize. So in late 2008, formally the Council Sustainability Committee was formed as the technical advisory body for the council. Next slide. On the screen right now, what you're seeing, since this symposia is focused on energy, are the 10 recommendations from the Mountain View Task Force on what the city should do in the area of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And I'm not going to go over all 10 of these, but I'm going to go ahead and just highlight a couple of them. For example, number 2, installing solar hot water and PV systems on city buildings. Number 6, encouraging property owners to undertake energy efficiency upgrades. And number 8, provide free energy audits for residents and promote PG&E's energy conservation programs. Next slide. So in a prior slide, I mentioned and told you about the sustainability committee that the council formed. And so basically what's happened in the 4 years that I've been in Mountain View is I've worked with that subcommittee twice to develop what we call environmental sustainability action plans. And basically what those are 3-year tactical plans that outline specific projects or programs that we will be focusing on during that 3-year period of time. And as you can see on the slide, the first one was from 2008 to 2011. It comprised 25 actions, and there was approximately $900,000 in projects that were part of that. Then more recently, just in April, I went to council and brought them the second incarnation of the ESAP, and that again was for another 3-year period of time, taking us out to 2014. In this case, 32 projects comprising about $1.2 million. And throughout those 2 ESAPs, there have been specific efficiency measures that we've been undertaking in terms of our city buildings to make them more efficient. And a quick approximation tells me that our city is saving in the realm of about $200,000 a year in our utility bill expenses based on doing those energy efficiency retrofits to the city buildings. So what does that translate into? That translates into wiser use of public dollars. Now, in addition to me working on both of these ESAPs and many late nights, one of the other speakers mentioned the federal stimulus funding. Well, the city in 2010 received $719,000 in federal stimulus funding, and our council chose to spend that money on 3 energy projects, specifically a residential energy efficiency program, Secondly, replacing some aging microturbines at our city landfill. And those microturbines are basically taking the methane that's coming off the landfill and generating electricity. And actually, some of that electricity is being used by a small search engine company in Mountain View called Google. And the third project is using some of the funds for replacement of our streetlights to high-efficiency induction technologies. Next slide. Now, I'm aware that the city of Benicia worked with Watson, the company Watson, to develop a residential energy efficiency program, and that was apparently quite successful. Also in Mountain View, as I just indicated in the last slide, since our council dedicated money to a residential program, I wanted to tell you a little bit about it on a high level, as it's a little bit different than the Benicia program. So our program is called Energy Upgrade Mountain View, and the beauty of it is designed to touch every resident in the city. It's designed for homeowners and for renters. Mountain View has over 50% of the residential population are renters. So this is a population that's kind of often forgotten when it comes to residential retrofits. For example, the program earlier mentioned, Energy Upgrade California. It's a wonderful program, but it is focused exclusively on single-family homeowners. And it's also focused on larger, more expensive retrofits in the home, such as replacing insulation, replacing windows, replacing your furnace, projects that can cost you anywhere from $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 to $15,000. Now, of course, the rebates under Energy Upgrade California are up to $4,000, but there's a fairly high bar of entry. You've got to spend a fair amount of money to retrofit your home. So when we designed our program, we wanted to complement Energy Upgrade California and provide a program that offers recommendations for residents for how to take no and low-cost actions in their home that will reduce their energy bills overnight. So what we do is, by gathering their 12 months of historic PG&E data, we have a baseline from when they start participating in the program. They answer about 10 to appliances in their home. Are they using it during the day, in the evening, summer, winter, et cetera, et cetera. We break it down from them, and we give them a real clear picture on where it is their energy is actually going in the home. And of course, the beauty of information is, as they say, information is power. So when you present someone with information, they have that knowledge so that they can make adjustments in the way they live. And so our program has actually 4 distinct areas within it. I'm not going to go into detail on those, but it's designed, again, it's customized to hit those people like renters who generally don't have really high bills, all the way to people who are living in 2,000 and 3,000 square foot homes whose energy bills are $300 and $400 a month. We've got a program designed specifically for each type of resident. And I'm excited to say the program's been in place for 1 year right now, and we've enrolled over 360 residents so far. Next slide. So we talked about a residential energy efficiency program in Mountain View. Benicia has had its own. Also wanted to give a little bit of commentary, and Pat's already talked about this a little bit, but to the commercial efficiency program sector. Now, if you look at Benicia's greenhouse gas inventory for the community, fully 75% of those emissions comes from the commercial and industrial sector. And that's not even considering the impact of Valero or the port. So that's a huge chunk of the pie. So I know that PG&E has spoken with you in a previous symposium, but I would be remiss today if I didn't at least mention to you, again, Pat already kind of talked about this a little bit, but what you see on the screen are a number of programs that are available to any commercial or industrial customer, PG&E customer in Benicia, and they are all free. They range everything from a simple 1-hour on-site audit to benchmarking and rate analysis, and as Pat mentioned, 0% on-bill financing for different kinds of energy efficiency retrofits. Now, I do want to draw your attention to the third bullet, which is under rate analysis. This is basically where you ask PG&E to look at all of your different rate tariffs for all of your different accounts and make sure they're optimized for that type of account. We did that with PG&E, and they did that for us for free, and we are now saving $45,000 a year for basically asking them to do something for us for free. So if Benicia has not already done this, this is the lowest possible hanging fruit that there is. It literally is dollars waiting to come in your door. So PG&E's got some great programs, and they've even got a special running right now. I talked with my PG&E rep today, and while supplies last, they are offering free plug-load occupancy sensors for all commercial and industrial customers. So run, do not walk to your local PG&E rep and take advantage of these great commercial customer programs. Next slide. So Judy talked, Caroline talked about the Silicon Valley Renewable Energy Project. Mountain View was one of the 9 agencies participating in that. I'm going to give you a little bit of an on-the-ground representation of kind of what that was like. I think at this point you have an idea of what a PPA is. It's basically when a vendor comes in and brings the money to you as a city, to install, design, install, maintain, and own, for example, a solar system on one of your city buildings. And the city has very little upfront expenses associated with this, and then you basically purchase that generated electricity from that vendor. And in the sustainability and technical world, this is called distributed generation. This is basically producing electricity locally on site without having to rely on the local utility to deliver it to you. So this is really the area and the direction we want to be moving in. Now, as Caroline also alluded, the PPA that we participated in with 8 other agencies, it was PPAs in general, and if you're interested in participating in the Alameda project that's underway, and Mountain View is also signed up again for that. Why? I'm not 100% sure, but no, I'm just kidding. It is a very technically and legally complex process. You need to go in with your eyes open. It's a very lengthy process, and particularly since the Alameda project is going to be probably maybe 3 or 4 times as large as the Silicon Valley project. Just be aware there is huge benefits, and as Caroline mentioned, that was the thrust of her presentation, huge benefits in collaboration. I completely agree. And you just need to be aware that things will take longer in that process, but there will be great benefits that come to you if you have patience. So Mountain View had 2 sites that they participated in the program, and those 2 sites, we figured that we're going to be saving $245,000 a year over 20 years as compared to if we had done nothing and continued to purchase power from PG&E. So some lesson learned. Basically, you need ideally to have a dedicated person to this because it is a fairly complex process. Most important, if anything, is to make sure you get all the relevant stakeholders together early, explain to them what the process is, answer their questions, overcome their objections, and get their buy-in so you don't have problems later on when you're at the 11th hour and you need the Director of Finance's support for the project. The one other thing to keep in mind is that if you look at dollar for dollar, a PPA is not the cheapest way to go. The cheapest way to go for example, getting into renewable energy is if you purchase the systems yourself outright. However, that requires you to front that money and have that money available. In Mountain View's situation, the 2 sites that I mentioned would have cost us about $900,000. If we'd just gone out and purchased them directly. So in this case, we were able to participate in renewable energy with very little upfront cost. So Pat has already talked about the PACE programs. I'm not going to go into any more detail. Next slide, please. on that. But I do want to tell you very quickly about an exciting program, a pilot program that the California Public Utility Commission has recently approved. It's a 2-year pilot program, and it's called a Renewable Energy Network. There are several of these that will be occurring around the state. Benicia and Solano County will be part of one called BayRen. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to provide a number of different kinds of financing programs for energy efficiency and renewable energy programs that the city can participate in, and it will fill in the gaps in the current utility incentive programs and the regional energy watch programs. So it will become effective in January of 2013. So look out for this one. It's currently in development, but by all intents and purposes, it looks like it's going to be a really great program. It's going to fill in perhaps the place where PACE has had some problems on the residential side. And next slide, my final slide. The city of Mountain View has been undertaking general plan update in the last 3 years. And basically the general plan is the city's guiding document. Well, in order for our general plan to be compliant with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, the general plan has to meet certain thresholds and requirements. So the city developed a companion document called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program. So basically what that greenhouse gas reduction program does is it lays out a series of 5 strategies and 20 measures that will basically mitigate the environmental impacts that are inherent in the general plan. That document is also, it meets the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's 2020 and 2030 greenhouse gas and air quality threshold requirements. And it is also aligned with a regional program that cities are collaborating on called One Bay Area. And this is basically an outcropping of the legislation called SB 375. And the whole focus of One Bay Area and SB 375 is making sure that future growth in our cities, and we will be growing, occurs along transit corridors. So we're reducing to the greatest extent possible the amount of automobile trips and vehicle miles traveled as we expand our cities and grow our cities. If we can focus that growth around transit and transportation corridors, then that greenhouse gases going forward as low as possible. And the next slide is my contact information, and I'm of course happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Steve. Let's say thank you. We have many cards for questions, so what I think I'll do is I'll read questions, and I'll read the one that I had that I was going to ask you, and that is, how did you conduct outreach for the energy upgrade in Mountain View? I mean, that was a pretty good return.
It's been actually a tough process to answer that question. Our enrollments from April of last year through December of last year were very slow. And then we were kind of scratching our heads, and we were advertising, to answer your question specifically, we're advertising in all city publications. We were trying to get the local media to write articles on us. We were reaching out to our neighborhood associations and to their leaders and having them put little blurbs about the program in their neighborhood association newsletters. We were actually attending neighborhood association events. We were working with the Chamber of Commerce. We were working with a number of local nonprofit organizations to get the word out. We were actually doing grassroots flyering of neighborhoods where we would literally send out volunteers to distribute 500 or 1,000 flyers in a day and drop it on people's doorsteps. So we were trying, and we also have a social marketing presence with Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. So we were really hitting all of the different markers, but our enrollments were really slow. And so we were scratching our heads toward the end of last year, and we did some focus groups. We decided to do some focus groups to find out why the program wasn't picking up steam. And the number one thing that came back is that people just hadn't heard of the program, despite all of our marketing. The other issue that we were coming up against is that people felt that they had already done a lot of their own energy efficiency measures in their home, and therefore they didn't want to take someone else's spot in the program because we have a limited budget and a limited number of seats that we can offer or audits that we can offer. And so people were not signing up also because of that. So basically what we did is we kind of modified some of our messaging to be a little bit, to include some normative elements, which is based on some best practices around energy efficiency programs. And then we got one of our local Mountain View newspaper to write a lengthy article on us. And then we actually also got coverage on CBS Channel 5 in San Francisco on the nightly news. And those things, finally the last thing we did was we implemented something called a multifamily complex blitz. And that's where we put flyers around a multifamily complex, and then we say, we're going to be here on Saturday, and we're going to be available to do these audits in your home for free, so just sign up here and give us a couple hours and we'll come and do the audit. And so those combination of the blitzes, the coverage in the media, and the changing of our messaging to incorporate what we heard in the focus groups, that's actually meant that we've more than doubled our numbers just since January 1st.
And then a couple of follow-up questions with this, and then we're going to move on. What % of the surveys were completed? So you had the contact with X number of homes, and how many of those were completed?
Sorry, surveys. I'm not quite understanding the question.
I'm just, so I'm trying to interpret.
Okay.
I believe that it's on the energy upgrade outreach.
Yes.
There are surveys, and I think perhaps the question means audits.
Oh, okay. How many were completed?
Correct.
So of that 360 that have so far registered in the program, I believe the number that have received an audit or completed an audit, and some of them are in process, but approximately 320. And so then there are still some more to go that are just kind of in the pipeline right now. But pretty much most people that sign up, they will complete the process.
And what is your follow-up program to take a look at what actually has been saved in a year?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great question. Since we get their baseline energy usage from day one when they enroll in the program, and then we provide them with these customized recommendations, we provide them with a monthly email that actually summarizes how much they're saving based on the changes that they have made. Or if they're not saving, maybe a reminder to do some of the recommendations that we've already given them.
That's excellent. Before we move on to Shawn, the story that I always like to tell about how to engage people in the world in which I work, which is water and the statewide basis, it's been really hard to get people to conserve water. And Marin, with an exception, because of the drought that you all went through, and there were lots of good programs, and you memorialized those through ordinances and so forth. Many, many years ago, Los Angeles, before it had seen the way of enlightenment, they were having a really hard time getting participation in water conservation. And so there was an elected official who went to his local church and said, we're just having a really hard time meeting this, blah, blah, blah. And what happened was that the pastor offered, with the blessings of the LA Water and Power, a free toilet on Sunday. And they had complete 99% participation and overnight changed entire neighborhoods. Hint. All right.
We actually are. I didn't mention that, but we have reached out to the faith organizations.
Yeah, so maybe it's a nano or something. I'm not really too sure what it would take anymore, but I love that story. Shawn Marshall is our next speaker, and she's the founder and executive director of Lean Energy US, a local energy aggregation network, a mission-based organization that exists to support the expansion and competitive success of clean energy community choice aggregation programs nationwide. Lean provides a national hub for resources and expertise and works in partnership with a range of organizations to actively support the community choice aggregation formation around the country. Lean is currently working in the states of Illinois, California, Massachusetts, and New York. In 2007, Shawn began service on the task force that ultimately formed the Marin Energy Authority, a joint powers agency that runs the first community choice aggregate in the state of California and the first clean energy in the country, clean CCA in the country. From 2009 early to now, Shawn served on the, when you put the acronyms, the Marin Energy Authority, founding board as the agency's vice chair, and she remains active in Marin's community choice efforts. And by the way, I have, in my water world, I actually am working with Alex Hines and met him, that's why I was in Novato today, and he was the planning director for Marin and was one of the co-conspirators in doing the community choice aggregate. I want to tell a very short story about Shawn. She does not put in here that she was an elected official, and she did something that was probably the bravest thing I've ever seen in my entire career. And it was at a meeting in Sacramento with a bunch of local elected officials from all over the state, and they were very angry at the state, saying that the state was taking our money, our local money. And she stood up. It was like a shark feeding frenzy. And she stood up and she says, you know, we're all in this boat together. And I was just no more proud of anybody than that moment. And that has burned a memorable thought in my mind that never again will I sit still and listen to that kind of thing without standing up. And I was happy to join you on that. And I think that we are very lucky to have you. Thank you very much. And so now you can begin.
Can you hear me? Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the invitation from Dominican University and the city of Benicia to come and present on a topic that I'm happy to say I'm passionate about. And the good news is that the passion seems to be spreading. So it's my pleasure to talk tonight about community choice aggregation. It's a terrible phrase. And just tell you a little bit about what it is and how it actually, it's perfect, my position in the lineup here. Because what CCA really can do is integrate many, if not all, of the programs we've talked about tonight. It can become a very big container for all the cool stuff that we've already talked about. So what is a CCA? The best way I can describe a CCA to the layperson or the general public is to really think about it as a big group buy, a Groupon, if you will, for energy procurement, for electricity specifically. And so CCA in the state of California was passed in 2002, and it allows cities or counties or groups therein to collaborate with one another to band together to purchase and or develop power on behalf of the residents and businesses of that community. That's really a big deal, not just from the procurement perspective, because very often you can realize cost savings. The home run here is really about owning and developing your own generation assets, and some of that was touched upon by folks already up here. What CCA does that's unique is that it provides a revenue stream, all important here because nobody's got extra money hanging around, and frankly PG&E isn't going to pay for it. And I'm not really sure those programs are free because the ratepayers are paying for them. But what a CCA does is that it basically redirects a revenue stream into a local area from which you can then bond against that through revenue bonding to then put projects in the ground. And that's where the long term of CCA really becomes an economic engine and very powerful for local governments. Next slide, please. CCA really is a hybrid approach. So it lives in between the shareholder-owned, investor-owned utility model that provides everything soup to nuts, and then on the flip side, the municipal public utility like Palo Alto, Redding, and they own all of the underlying infrastructure. What CCA does is that it essentially splits the functions whereby local jurisdictions take control of their power supply, which means that they control the rates and also what's in it. You can really green it up quickly. And you partner with the incumbent utility, in our case PG&E, to distribute, transmit, and do all of the line maintenance and customer billing. So the next question should naturally be, does PG&E like this? Not really. And although they've mellowed out, I'm happy to say, but they don't like it because it's a home run for local governments, frankly, and for consumers. It's threatening to them because it's basically taking over the supply side of the energy business. And to their credit, they've invested a lot over time in assets, and unfortunately, too many of them are fossil-based. But CCAs do pay an exit fee, a cost recovery. It's called cost recovery surcharge. So please don't ever think that PG&E is being left out in the cold because of CCA or the proliferation of CCA. That is truly not the case. We pay for the privilege of taking over our power. So, but it's a real incremental step, possibly toward full municipalization. It's an affordable step because you don't have to take on the cost of all the underlying infrastructure, which is just becoming prohibitive. And at any rate, you would be buying infrastructure that's quite antiquated. So until there's major investment in bringing that grid up to speed, if I were a city council member, which I still am, I wouldn't touch it because you're not buying state-of-the-art equipment. So CCA allows you to really take control of what's important. Next slide, please. Where is community choice now? CCA is enabled by state legislation. One of the things that LEAN is going to be working on in the future is national legislation that would just enable it across the country, but for now it's state by state. It is taking off like wildfire in Illinois. 250 communities just passed aggregation referenda, and they're looking at a 25% rate savings on their electricity bills from the incumbent utility. It's in Massachusetts, Ohio, Rhode Island, and New Jersey are the other states where it's enabled. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. You can all look at this later. What this does is it provides a chronology of where CCA has been in the state of California. Local Government Commission was very involved early on with a grant through the CEC. PG&E actually was in favor of the legislation when it came about as a result of deregulation, and then they had a change of heart and frankly made things difficult. And I'm glad to report that that they're no longer doing that, at least not overtly. It's gotten a little tougher, I would say, at the CPUC, and they're actually, their strategy has shifted to support more local government partnerships, and so I'm so appreciative of them for that, but I want you all to pay attention to climate action plans that are funded by PG&E and ask them about where is CCA. And if they're so threatened by it, you really ought to look at it because there's some real potential in it, but they're missing, I think, when PG&E is funding some of these climate action plans. So I'll just be honest about that. Next slide, please. Why do communities pursue CCA? There are 7 reasons. Marin County and many others lead with the significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, but the fact is that group energy purchasing, this is just economics 101, lowers rates. And so in California right now, the rates are competitive. We're about on parity in Marin County. In Illinois, it's a 25% savings. In Massachusetts, they're looking at a 6 to 10% rate savings. Over time, and as communities invest in their own power assets through this bonding capacity, those rates are going to stabilize and go down over time because you don't have the volatility of the market causing rate hikes over time. And you're also getting off of fossil fuels, which are going through the roof, as many of you already know. Greenhouse gas emissions are another huge reason. So in Marin Energy Authority, at full rollout, which will be this summer, we're looking at 40,000 tons per year of emissions reduced. That is significant. It's like the equivalent of taking something like 100,000 cars off the road. It's the only bigger sector for greenhouse gas reduction is transportation. After that, it's really all about energy savings. After that, it's about buildings. So this is, a real home run for us because we don't have a robust transportation system, and It's also going to meet our AB 32 compliance goals. The projections say we'll be meeting that within 5 years. That is significant for the cities that are participating in the JPA, because that's a cost savings to us. We don't have to spend a lot of money on other kind of narrower programs when we're a member of this JPA, because CCA is allowing us to meet those objectives and comply with state requirements. Consumer choice and market accessibility is the third reason. In the state of California, we are what they call a partially restructured state. Other states are fully restructured so that they have retail energy providers. They can pick anybody they want. In those states, the cost of energy is typically lower. And so here, what CCA is doing at the residential and commercial level is giving us access to the market to negotiate better prices for our ratepayers. So we're localizing that procurement, we're localizing that energy with the intent of greening the grid and lowering rates. A big one that communities need to be looking at is how that revenue that's being redirected from PG&E represents about 25% of your overall bill. What happens is when a county or a group of local governments forms a joint powers agency, that JPA takes control of that revenue stream. That revenue stream, just in the Bay Area alone, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, is projected in the billions annually. So that ain't no small potatoes. And in truth, what you're able to do with that is first of all, you got to pay for your cost of energy. Okay, that's a humongous chunk of change. But in Marin, we're already seeing, with only 10% of our customer base, that we have a couple of $1 million in an operating reserve through which to do local programming. So we have a local electric vehicle charging station installation program. We're looking to administer solar PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. We've just submitted a full energy efficiency plan to the CPUC. We've partnered with the county on energy efficiency upgrades. We're working in our low-income neighborhoods to train citizens to go into homes and do those retrofits. So this is the integrator capacity of a CCA that is not taxpayer funded. There's no federal dollars in that. It's the redirection of that ratepayer revenue that then provides the economic engine to do your local programming. And also, you can bond against that in the future to actually put projects in the ground to feed your CCA. So it's not a slam dunk. It's complicated, but as Caroline was pointing out, it takes a little longer to go into this collaborative approach, but the wins are just significant going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, I've talked about the fact that CCAs can greatly expand the production of renewables. In Massachusetts, the Cape Light Compact, which is their CCA, partnered with Barnstable County, and they are now doing 50 megawatts of solar PV. They use their bonding capacity, and they're doing that on 44 sites in the Cape and Martha's Vineyard. So they're really realizing the benefits of distributed generation. That power generated feeds back into the CCA. So it is that lovely closed loop cycle. And in Marin, we have a contract with Shell Energy North America that is providing basically our baseload power. We've also signed 4 long-term power purchase agreements with 3 solar providers in California, and we've done some biogas up in Marysville. And those are 51 megawatts of power that will feed our Marin CCA at a rate that's competitive with PG&E. So we are now in Marin County offering a 50% as a threshold, as a baseline default product to all of our customers. PG&E is currently at 17% renewables. So we're able to ratchet that up and achieve our goals that much quicker. And I've talked about that CCA really integrates the public policy goals, not only of the state, typically of the region, and enables innovation. So all of the programs that we've talked about, this is just what's happening today. But when you think about demand response, you think about apps on your iPhone, home networks, all of those things really can be enabled much more quickly, and they can be better tailored to your local residents. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of cookie-cutter approach. You can really tailor your programs to feed directly into what your residents want. Next slide, please. This one is hard to read, but what I want to point out here is that very long orange line. This is a clip that came out of San Anselmo's Climate Action Plan last year. And they hired a third-party auditing company to come in and look at all of their different initiatives that they were going to, or they have done through climate action planning. And when their council made a decision last year or 2 years ago to join the Marin Energy Authority at a 100% renewable product, which is our deep green product, you can see that that orange line is essentially the metric tons of greenhouse gases reduced through just participating in MEA. And it pretty much trumps everything else. All of those other things are valid and important. You've got green building standards on there, local transportation, solar installation on municipal rooftops, all good. But when you aggregate that power in terms of then turning around and investing in green power, you can see what it does in terms of your climate reduction strategy. Next slide, please. I got to do mine here. Sorry. Jobs creation. So this is a slide that comes from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And what they did, along with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, was they did a study on what kind of jobs could be created through local ownership of renewable projects, whether that's solar PV, wind, coal, natural gas. And what you see on that top line there is the number of jobs created for solar is significant. And in California, solar is, in my understanding, the #1 renewable resource right along with wind. But take a look at this slide later, hopefully it'll be online. You can see that that really is a home run for jobs generation. Next slide, please. How can CCAs be cost competitive? Because in California, it's a tough environment here. And so our recommendation is that you've got to have a diversified energy portfolio. You cannot approach the CCA in the same way that the utility approaches its business, because they're the big 10,000-pound gorilla in the room. You're small fries. But you have the ability to be nimble, to go, you can do direct contracting. Doesn't take forever and years. And so if you have a diversified portfolio, you might work with an energy services provider like Shell. They're a big 10,000-pound gorilla. They can compete on the open market. You might have direct-to-market power purchase agreements. Those should be long-term, short-term. You've got to really, work with grade A level technicians to help you manage and design your portfolio. And then there should be, we think, about 40 to 50% left open over time for asset formation. Because if you look at Sacramento Municipal Utility District, Northern California Power Agency, they are kicking booty on rates. Redding is another one. They're saving 20 and 30%, and about 50% of their portfolio is owned. So that again is, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but that's really the home run with CCA. Also, to be cost competitive, CCAs are low overhead. They're nonprofit. We're not paying shareholder profit margins like they do at the investor-owned utility. Our salaries are commensurate with public officials, not private sector. So nobody's making $1 million. Thank you. Low borrowing costs, bonding capacity. And then you can do discounts on the prepayment of energy, which really can save you money over time. Next slide, please. The customer experience. When you initiate a CCA, the customer is not going to experience a thing, because your power is still coming through the power lines that are here. It's still coming through your heating vent. The only thing that's different is that there's an insert in the bill that says third-party supplier, and that identifies all of your electricity charges that are paid for by your CCA. You put your check in, and then what happens is PG&E then forwards the money back to the CCA entity. So it's quite easy on your residential customer base. It's not a hassle at all. It is an opt-out program. So if, let's say, the city of Benicia, along with, I would recommend Solano County, were to look at this, what would happen is if you enable this, your customers are automatically switched over, and then they're given 4 opt-out notices over a 5-month period to opt out of the program. You can also opt out, a customer can opt out at any time. If they're not satisfied, they go right back to PG&E. The CCA is required to put up a bond, so in the event of wholesale failure, which we have not seen at all, even close in Marin County, because that ratepayer revenue is significant, the customers would be returned to PG&E without any interruption in service. So the PUC does require that safety measures are put in so that your customer base would never be hurt.
Shawn, do you know what the opt-out rate was in Marin?
Yeah. In our first phase, when PG&E did spend $4 million in Marin County fighting the program, and we spent $50,000, the opt-out rate was 20%. In other states, like Illinois, where they don't have utility opposition, the opt-out rates are about 3%. Right now, with our phase 2 for Marin, it's right at about 10%. Okay, so next slide, please. What are the risks? Funny you should ask. Opt-out risk. Because if you have utility opposition, then chances are, they're doing marketing, they're scaring the customers. You should have seen some of the brochures that came out. And so you've just got to model your program. You've got to do revenue planning, and there are experts who do this all day long, to mitigate some of that risk so that you plan accordingly for potentially high opt-outs. I think they're going down because PG&E is not doing any of that kind of marketing in Sonoma, which is up next, in San Francisco, which is also about ready to launch. Price competition, natural gas prices are low at the moment. Our feeling is that you ought to have a diversified portfolio. I think that CCAs and frankly any other renewable energy, I think you ought to use natural gas as a hedging strategy. It's a transition fuel. Use it. It's inexpensive, and it can begin to offset the fossil-based. Coal's cheapest, but coal's the worst. So go to natural gas, which is still low, and then really begin to layer on your renewable resources, but it can be used as an offset. And then asset formation over time. Political risk. So, we need to have people like you who are willing to be champions stay in office, because it can create uncertainty with political turnover. And CCA, the way it is enabled is through local government, and you've got to have local councils who are willing to sit up here and take a vote to form a JPA to then move ahead with your implementation plan. So we're happy to talk to you about that if you decide to get interested. And
so now you're going to make me feel terrible to tell you that we really need to have you wrap up.
There's some regulatory risk. It's getting better. Next, this is just a quick slide that shows the number of communities that are exploring CCA. I have Benicia on here, not in any kind of official capacity, but it shows the revenues that could be generated for all of Solano County just based on CEC's own calculators. And in Solano County, that is, that's in millions. That's looking like $216 million per year. Next, getting started, and then this will be my last. Ask for help. That's what LEAN does. We're a nonprofit. We don't charge anything to help you understand this. You need to understand what your political environment is. Yes, CCA is a green issue. CCA is also an economics issue. So it's bipartisan. We have the farthest left progressives who love it, and the far right Republicans, because it's an economic engine for local communities. But you've got to be clear about how it meets your local policy goals. And then just my last slide, I'll stop here, is this is us, this is Lean Energy, and if you then would go all the way to the end, I'll put my my stuff up, contact information. There are a couple of slides that I didn't get to that you can look at online later that use Marin County as a case study, so you can see what their energy mix is, and you can see how we've met our renewable portfolio standard within the first 8 months. and we've paid back all of the debts and everything, and refinanced everything, so we are no longer at all publicly funded. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. I think you might have an opportunity to go back to those slides because we have some really good questions coming in. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read one card I have specific to Shawn, and then we'll go back through the cards and the questions that I didn't get to. And I'm going to see if I understand this question. Please explain in the hybrid model of CCA who does what and how is that paid? In other words, procure, manage, store, distribute, administration, et cetera.
Okay. So the way it works is that if you just think about dividing the pie in half, and you've got the supply side, meaning procurement, asset formation, generating the power. That is what the local governments band together to do. They work with the power suppliers to either buy the power through power purchase agreement or ultimately to put your own power in the ground. But it's all on the supply side. Then you have a service agreement that is ratified by the PUC to work with PG&E in this case, that because they continue to maintain and own the underlying distribution system. So all the pole and wire infrastructure stays with PG&E. They continue to bill for that. They charge for that. We all pay for it. And they do all the line maintenance and all of the customer billing. So it's really, as you think about it, divided in half. The JPA, you could think about it as an energy JPA for that integrates all these various programs. They have an administration. That administration is supported by ratepayer income, and they run all those programs, and then PG&E runs all of the delivery and billing side.
And so one of the other questions is, what's the role of the California Public Utilities Commission in terms of oversight? Do you provide annual reports, monthly reports? Are there red flags that they notice, and do they intervene?
So CCAs, like municipal utilities, are not regulated in the same way that IOUs are. The PUC came about and exists specifically to regulate monopoly utilities. That's why they exist. So with the PUC has to ratify a CCA's implementation plan, which is essentially its business plan. The PUC has to ratify the service agreement that you have with the utility, and the PUC gets involved if there are, and there sometimes are, disputes. The PUC also needs to make sure that the rules of the road, the rules of engagement, are fair. And so, and that's been tricky because they're not really used to an open market in this state. So we're learning a lot from Illinois, but they're involved in a lot of proceedings having to do with cost shifting, with reducing the exit fees that are charged, and a lot of those findings now are going in our favor. But it's been slow going.
Well, and then internalize that you're operating essentially as a JPA. What trigger points do you have in the event that there might be some trouble and you don't want to ignore that? So what are the early warning steps that you take?
Well, relating back to the PUC, and then I'll go to your question, CCAs are required to follow the same rules in many areas as a utility. So we have resource adequacy requirements, same as a utility. You've got to prove on an annual basis that you have enough power to feed your load, your section of the grid, if you will. We're also required to meet renewable portfolio standards the same way that the IOUs are. And then in terms of internally, the fact is that the CCA is a business. So once you're up and running and you've got that ratepayer revenue, you're running it as a business. And so the board of directors then, which is typically elected officials from each of the member cities, just like any other JPA, is watching over the policies, the procurement strategies, the bonding capacity, how is that affecting your budget, and making corrections. But we have a significant operating an operating reserve account, and we had to post a bond, it's like an escrow account, in the event of failure so that we could have a return of customers to PG&E without there being a problem.
Okay, great. And then this one last question on this card. Can you outline in a few steps how the revenue stream feeds into a bonding approach for projects?
So, and this is something actually that Sonoma's doing a better job of this than Marin County, I would say, right now. Because you're using the capacity of revenue bonds, but once the JPA is formed, it's going to take a little while for that revenue to stabilize, and you've got to have all we're just going into phase 2 with our customer base. Well, from there, you've got credit capacity because it's based on, you've got a track record. It's almost like tax returns. You know what your revenues are, and then you can bond against it because you are a nonprofit public agency. So you have all of the benefits of being a nonprofit. One of the things we're working on with Sonoma is how you marry that nonprofit public agency bonding capacity with the private sector. And they've got the 7-year tax credits, but those tax credits may be expiring, and so we're really looking at how you bring the private sector in earlier to be a little more creative on getting projects in the ground sooner.
Okay, now I'm going to go to the remaining questions that I have so far, and in order, and all of you can answer them if you wish. Has there been much opposition to wind turbines in your experience? And have they been put up in urban areas that you know of? Caroline.
Alameda County's done wind turbines. We've done the very small ones that sit on top of a building perimeter. They're generally just a couple of feet high, and they're very small. They don't generate a tremendous amount of power, but they do contribute a little bit to the load. So we haven't done them in any of our like downtown Oakland buildings yet, but we have put them out at the Santa Rita Jail, and we are looking at using them at other facilities.
Well, I know that this goes to the the issue of noise and aesthetics. So I suppose the jail folks haven't complained too much about the aesthetics, but how's the noise working?
They're very quiet. They're small. They're like I said, they're very small little turbines, and they're not like the Altamont Pass turbines that we all see. I mean, so they don't make a lot of noise.
Yeah. Any of you have any experience? Yes, Steve.
So just a piece of your question, I think you asked about opposition a little bit. While the city of Mountain View doesn't have any wind turbines in city boundaries itself, we actually do have we did look at putting in some turbines in our Shoreline Regional Park, because that actually gets a fair amount of wind off the bay. But we had some Stanford students that basically determined that it wouldn't be economically viable. But speaking to the opposition, the Audubon Society is regularly engaged in politics in Mountain View, largely because we have some protected burrowing owls in the Shoreline Park. But also, one of the things that I'm hearing more and more about as the wind discussion kind of becomes more mainstream, and I don't have the facts here, is that depending on the type of design of the wind turbine, there are a fair number of bird kills that some of these devices have. And I read an article recently that was third party, supposedly, and I was kind of shocked to learn that in certain situations there are a fair number of wildlife deaths due to these things. So I think it's something, again, that policymakers need to go into with open eyes and really understand that while there are lots of benefits of wind and wind power, particularly as it's becoming price competitive with mainstream fossil fuels, the wildlife implications is just one factor that needs to be considered.
Well, I would like to speak to that a little bit. The early days with wind turbines, particularly up in Altamont, it was pretty much Blood Alley. And over time, the design has changed and modified that, attenuated those kills quite a bit. In the Montezuma Hills, it was they actually had learned some of the hard lessons from Altamont. So in the early days, they began doing surveys. They had a bird count, bird kill limit kind of approach. And a lot of that, of course, was with Sacramento Municipal Utility District. And over time, they have looked at some of the solutions which seem to be working. So their annual reports are looking better. and it's not quite so devastating. The problem is that we are in the Pacific Flyway, and the birds do come in for the benefits of the water. So I think while it's attractive in some regions of the country, it's going to be a really hard thing to accomplish here in the Bay Area with the Pacific Flyway, because there's seasonal migrations. It's just not 2 months out of the year. There are all kinds of avian species that are traveling back and forth on a regular basis. So in Benicia, we've had that discussion, and some of the preliminary studies look like because where the proposed wind turbines might be, they're not near refugia, which is the big problem. When you have the birds startled in flight, they often can run into the wind turbines. So I think that we have some opportunities here. Certainly PG&E has recognized that because they're working on it. The concern is really, really high, and I'm glad that you have that level of sensitivity because it really demonstrates what the Bay Area is working on. So I just wanted to for the public to make sure they understood the differences in the regions. Anybody else on that question, or shall we move on? All right, this is for Caroline. What specific battery type did Alameda County choose for its battery energy storage for the jail?
I don't remember. Really, sorry, I can't answer it. I will email you, and we can maybe put it up on the website.
Right. Okay. So that would be great.
The battery it's made by a company called BYD, which is a Chinese company, and it's a massive battery. It's basically holding the load from both the fuel cell system and the solar, and storing that energy that's generated from the solar, obviously during the day, and then they're able to run lights and various functions off of it during the evening. But I don't know the technology type, so I know people are interested. I'll email you.
Okay, great. The next card I have is regarding power purchase agreement. Are these best done on an individual site by site basis or group sites?
PPAs are generally done on a per site basis. I mean, you look at the economics of each site and evaluate those. Where you can gain some economies are in the way that we've done it in the Silicon Valley project, and then also in the regional project, we'll be bundling those different sites together. So say you have rooftop sites that are around 300 kW, you put those together into a bundle and you get a price for the bundle, even though individual sites may be smaller or larger. And that way you are able to achieve some good pricing.
Okay. How large is the city of Mountain View, population and revenue?
Our population is about 76,000, and revenue, I think you might have stumped me on that one. I haven't looked at our budget recently. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, good. We'll be able to post some of these answers up on the website. And this question is, does PG&E have any, let me see. All right, does PG&E have any legitimate reason to worry about distributed energy generation at the residential level? It's not a difficult question, you guys.
I think the main concern that they might have is that they're trying to integrate a lot of different small sites into their system, especially if you're putting energy back into the system. But otherwise, other than being able to sell you more energy, I don't think there's a problem.
I mean, in my view, what I would, in the perfect world in California, I would actually love to see functional separation, if not a fully open market, but at least functional separation so that PG&E is required to upgrade the grid so that it can better accommodate distributed generation and all of that. And right now, what you've got sort of split allegiance because they're still heavily invested in generation, large-scale generation, which is taking up a lot of that. So I think that there is a little bit of a problem, but we need to make the investment. And, it's not just PG&E, and I want to diss on them. It really is. It's going to have to be a real state infrastructure and investment in our grid.
I have a really big philosophical question to ask you, and I'm just going to kind of set it up. Interestingly, California's energy kind of started off the way our water supply started off, and that is the source of the energy came from the Sierra, and the population was on the coast. So we right away developed some pretty bad habits of having our energy transmitted over a really long distance. And this distributive energy is kind of going back to thinking in terms of think smaller and thinking more at a self-sustainable level and self-contained. Some people argue that PG&E would really like to maintain these mega facilities with alternative energy because that's the business they're in and that's what they're used to. And so it seems like there's this tension between the idea that you could have more efficiency locally and have maybe a greater sense of actually where your energy is coming from, and versus, it's put in terms of versus the larger facility. Why don't each of you address that?
Well, I know something, on one of the slides I had, I didn't talk about it. I talked about the zero net energy communities, but also in that same bullet point that talked about renewable energy secure communities, and it's a program that the Energy Commission had some grant funding for, which is looking at that type of stuff, and Davis and the University of California got some money out of that program to help them develop this zero net energy community. I know Humboldt County got some money, and there were grants given all over the state. I went to their first annual kind of summit on their response and their programs, but I haven't been back since then. So I know they probably do an annual report at the Energy Commission. So you could find out more information about that aspect of it anyway. When you have distributed generation, you don't lose electricity over the wires, which you do. I don't know what the exact loss rate is, but it's quite a bit. So there is some energy savings that way as well. But it is, PG&E and the other utilities are in the business of these. It's easier for them to deal with these big projects than for a bunch of little projects. And it's the same thing is true when they're doing their energy efficiency stuff. It's easier for them to deal with a huge industrial customer than to deal with 10,000 residential customers. So that's one reason that local governments are really good partners with the utilities in order doing the smaller outreach, smaller businesses and smaller residential programs, because they don't have the capacity to do that.
Caroline?
Really, there's, two things. One is that it's a very long cycle time to build a new large power plant. And so, PG&E may recognize that there's a deficiency in supply, that demand is too high or growing, and it will still take them 15 years to permit, plan, design, and build out a new power plant. So from the supply side, they need to have distributed generation. They need to be able to put in and incent all of us through the various means that we're talking about in doing renewable energy projects that are distributed generation. Demand is growing, and if you look at projections for electricity use, we do have conservation methods, and we are in California doing a good job, but in general, because of our information technology needs, we see those demand curves continuing to increase, and so we have to invest in distributed generation in order to meet that increasing demand.
Steve, thank you.
A few thoughts here. I think part of this is we've got, like she mentioned, the 10,000-pound gorilla. Part of it is just the tension is around them moving into a new world, if you will, a new world view, and letting go of control on some level, because that's like Pat has said, that's the business they've been in. But the world is changing, and entities like PG&E are doing great things, and they move very slowly. And our world is demanding us to move more rapidly, so we have to start thinking more creatively. One of the things that comes to mind in terms of that tension is PG&E clearly has expenses associated with their infrastructure. And as we all have talked about, a lot of that infrastructure is aging. So there's a lot of money that's going to need to go into rebuilding the grid, and a smart grid at that, over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so they probably have some fear around, well, wait a second, we're going to have to spend money doing all this, and now all these people are going to basically produce power locally, so we're not going to be recouping our expenses through the same models that we historically have. So that's one of the issues, I think. And finally, I think it's important to also talk about the state's renewable portfolio standard. And this is the other side of the tension, which is PG&E by law, by California state law, must produce a percentage, a certain increasing percentage of its power from renewable sources. It's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard. And so if they allow or even encourage local distributed generation, that supports their own reaching of those goals. So the flip side of the tension is they really should be supporting this because they have to meet these laws.
Shawn?
Really ditto on everything. Just two comments I'll make. You'll very often hear the term microgrids. That really is what's going on, I think, at Davis. They did a microgrid down at UC San Diego, too, I believe. And I think that one of the investments that I would love to see the utilities make in terms of the grid is really more investment on, and frankly, renewable companies is storage. Because that enables you to kind of create microgrid islands where, again, it's that closed loop cycle. And I'm not a technician in that regard, but it just seems like we need more investment in storage. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Another question is, how are you measuring greenhouse gas reductions?
If not an oversimplified answer, we are measuring our greenhouse gas reductions not only on a project-by-project basis. So for each, for example, retrofit of our buildings with some new type of efficiency technology, we are capturing and tracking the actual kilowatt-hour savings so that we know exactly how many greenhouse gases are reduced on a project-by-project basis. But kind of pulling up 30,000-foot view, many cities in the area conducted 2005 or earlier greenhouse gas inventories, which Mountain View did. And we are actually in the process of conducting a new inventory for 2010 for both our government operations and the community at large. So from that perspective, we're using the same methodology as apples to apples as possible, although there have been some slight changes in inventory methodologies. But the idea is that we want to basically do these inventories on a regular basis so we really can track whether our efforts are in fact resulting in reduction in emissions.
Anybody else? Shawn?
Yeah, I'll just say it's highly technical, the way that they calculate it, but what Marin Energy Authority has done is to hire a third-party accounting kind of entity. It's called the Climate Registry, and we have to submit all kinds of data based on the power supply that we have, usage data, all that kind of stuff, and then they crunch through whatever model it is, and then they've done it. We've also gone through the US EPA. They have some calculators, but we find that this third-party accounting really gives us the credibility that we need. And then on a second thing, I believe that all utilities do this, but CCA, we need to submit through, it's called Western Regis. It is, again, an accounting method where you have to enter almost like it's like an ingredients label, the label on the back of a food package. But instead what it is, it's the label on your power supply, and you have to enter all of that to the state. I believe that's twice a year. And you also get some calculations on greenhouse gas reductions out of that because some of your supply is carbon-free, et cetera. So there are a couple different ways to do it.
And also the cap and trade, because you're going to have to demonstrate that what the standard is for the savings in cap and with the greenhouse gas reduction through carbon. I'm going to ask this question, even though we sort of answered it when we asked Steve about the outreach program, but this is specific to the Energy Upgrade Program. So how do you publicize Energy Upgrade Program?
Well, that's actually somebody else in my office, but I know that what we did, we had the funding from the Energy Commission to work with counties, and every county has its own website. For Energy Upgrade California, which connects with local contractors and rebates and so forth. So I'm just not the person in our office that did that, so I don't know.
Well,
Sorry.
this is the consumer recommendation. So as I said, I went through the energy upgrade, and I'm just now getting back from PG&E, but it's between 27 and 30% reduction, and I'm supposedly a greenie. I mean, this is really an amazing thing to me. So what I would do is stick a sign out on my front area and say, I saved 27, 30%, and I got this much back from PG&E, and my house is quieter. I mean, what more could you say? If I'm driving along and I see this, I mean, wow, you know, there are two things I care about, money and quiet home. So it's a suggestion.
I'll let Kate know.
I have two more questions. Do we have any more questions out there? And we're nearing the time to wrap up. So here we go. Where do you think online energy monitoring fit into the mix and behavior changes? So I think that's kind of getting at maybe the smart meter and what PG&E has, and then behavioral changes. How do you, that's a whole nother question. How do you get at behavioral changes? Steve? And then Caroline? All right.
Online monitoring is great. I mean, you're able to give people direct information about how much energy they're actually using. And in our government facilities where we've done this, we've actually had competitions between departments about trying to reduce their electricity use, and getting folks to by putting out information through e-newsletters and that type of thing, letting them know that a particular building is using more electricity than another building, maybe even in the same department. And so we use competition to help get people a little bit more aware and more conscientious about doing things like turning off their computers at night and making sure their lights are off and that sort of thing. So, from the government employee perspective, it's very, very helpful.
So maybe when you come into work in the morning and your computer monitor is still on, it could be programmed to say, shame on you, you should have turned this off. Anybody else? Steve?
So for anyone who's not aware of this, if you are a business or a resident and you have a PG&E smart meter, basically you can create a PG&E account online and view your energy usage throughout the day. It's not on a minute-by-minute basis. I've forgotten exactly what the increment is, but certainly on an hourly basis, you can actually track your energy usage online, and you can see, take a look at kind of how your usage has changed, maybe either during the day or over time. So that's a new feature that has been a result of the smart meter rollout by PG&E. I also did want to mention it's not online monitoring, but it's something that I think may be increasingly interesting to people as we go forward. One of those 4 programs that are part of Energy Upgrade Mountain View is, and we've got some control group. We're actually working with Stanford University to make sure that the results that come out of Energy Upgrade Mountain View are really efficacious. And so we actually have some control groups in the program, but we've got one of the program elements that actually is a device that we come and we attach. We first of all attach something to your electricity meter. An electrician will do this for free. And then you've got a little device that sits, wherever you want it to sit in your house. It's a little LCD display, and it will show you your electricity usage in real time. So one of the things we wanted to build into Energy Upgrade Mountain View was the ability to see if people change their behavior in their energy usage in their homes just by presenting to them their real-time energy usage and not presenting any other recommendations for how to reduce their usage. A lot of people are kind of referring to this as the Prius effect. When you put the gas mileage in front of you, people tend to drive more slowly. So we're actually building in a way to find out if we give people that information, will they make behavior changes on their own?
If you have a dollar sign, a running dollar sign, go with it.
And you can purchase those today for your own residence. It's nothing magical.
Yeah. we're going to stay with a card, so if you have a question, I'm going to have Patrick say something first.
Yeah, I just want a couple of things that other people said brought some things up for me, so I just wanted to kind of let people know. They're mainly resources. And one thing I forgot to mention too when I was talking about the Sonoma County PACE program, they just completed a replicability guide, and that's available on their website. So it's free to download that, and I can get that information to you. But if you just go to Sonoma County and look up their energy independence program, it'll be right there. Also, the Silicon Valley Renewable Project also did a guidebook on how to do those joint purchases and so forth. So that's also available out there for free, and they can probably give you the little link to that, and I can do that as well. And also, I forget who mentioned CEQA, but the Governor's Office of Planning and Research right now is just completing guidelines on how to make sure your general plan updates and your climate action plans are CEQA compliant. So that's going to be available very, very soon.
All right, and here's a card, and this will be our last question. The real-time reporting, says, is also built into some residential PV systems. Yes, and I believe that that's part of the package that you can actually buy. It's kind of a box thing that tells you what your behavior is. So I went hiking in western mountains of southwest India, the Coorg Mountains, which are called the Scotlands of India. And I always think that's insulting. India's been around for 6,000 years, and But anyway, I went hiking there with my cousin, and we stayed in this area called Honey Valley. And while we were staying there, all our power and all our resources and all our water were from the region. So no hairdryer for sure. They didn't have enough power for that, but they had a little methane producer on the resort, and they had the water that was piped in that ran a little Swiss generator. It was really cute, little metal water wheel with cups that would pick up the water, and then we just turned the generator. And then the gas was for slow cooking during the day, so the meals were planned around something like we do with our crock pots, only this was with the methane gas, and then the higher power needs were generated with wind. So it was pretty cool. And it was, you could just walk right past it and never know what was going on. And I thought, how resourceful, how inventive, and what we can learn. And it's kind of like thinking small and being self-sufficient. I thought that was the lesson that I took home. With that story, I want to say how much I so very much appreciate all of you. It's been really, really informative, and it was billed as kind of practical information, and it indeed has been very rewarding. And this is our last symposium of a 4-part symposia. So I want to thank all the people that made this happen. It took a lot of work. I know it's not easy to find the right people, to get the questions and so forth, and the organizing. And I want to thank the public for participating. It's your interest makes this happen, and your questions were really first rate. So hats off to the Community Sustainability Commission and all your work, and thank you so very much, the Dominican University. And that's it for the evening. Thank you.